I have to be able to put some of my extra horsepower into caring about my local community and feeling like I'm making a difference. You have to put the time in to be known as somebody that's going to volunteer, that's going to care, that's going to be good for their word. But that kind of change is so accessible to people, and your council and your commission can make those changes all the time.
Welcome to the Building Culture Podcast, where we explore holistic solutions to crafting a more beautiful, resilient, and thriving world through the built environment. I'm your host, Austin Tennell. If you are in the market for high quality windows or doors, whether residential or commercial, new construction or remodels, I highly recommend you check out Sierra Pacific Windows, who we use at Building Culture on a lot of our projects, as well as if you are in the state of Oklahoma, check out One Source Windows and Doors, and want to thank them for sponsoring this podcast. I want to start telling you at the beginning of each and every episode why I'm having a particular guest on the podcast. If you've been listening to me, you probably know that I'm not just choosing, random people that happen to be in real estate or happen to be a builder or whatever, and then just having a conversation, not knowing where it's going. I'm really inviting people on that I find very interesting, or I have a question or an area of interest that I want to know more about. And some people I know better than others. And so I'll start this week with Ali. And Ali is both an architect and a landscape architect working out of Fayetteville. So Fayetteville is pretty close to Oklahoma City. There's a lot of amazing stuff going on in Fayetteville, Arkansas, for anyone that's heard about it or have done some tours. And I think the next CNU is going to be in Arkansas in 2026. So I wanted to talk to Ali because I think we're like a similar age, in some ways, similar career trajectories. She's a really just prolific person, business owner. She's an architect and landscape architect. Her company does interior design and development. She's really involved with her city, and I think she's been on planning commission. And so the concept, this idea of like when I first wanted to reach out to Ali, it's like I know they've done a lot of great work in Arkansas, and so I wanted to talk about that. How has she financed her projects? How has she built her company? And also how has she built relationships with the people and built trust in the community to be able to do what she's doing now? Because I've been in business long enough to know when I see someone that's doing that much, they have to have built a lot of trust. And then on one other aspect is her work with the Incremental Development Alliance, which I actually learned a lot about. I didn't realize how much it had changed since I first went to a workshop, 2016 or something. And they put on a lot of amazing workshops for city staff and municipalities across the country, kind of like helping them understand the development process and how to get kind of towards the goal of more, beautiful, walkable, people first neighborhoods and creating the conditions for that. So it's a really fun, interesting conversation about business, about terraforming your own city, about career trajectory and kind of not really fitting in a box in terms of your career, which I really resonated with. I hope you enjoy it. Ali, thanks for coming on the podcast. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Hi, Austin. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you've got... Man, it's like, it takes a while to even explain what all you do because you do so many different things, which actually is very, I think in today's day and age is very unique because there's so much specialization out there. And with, a lot of times people think with all the complexity, we need to specialize so we can handle it. But I think that hasn't necessarily served us very well and certainly doesn't serve us now. And actually to do really interesting projects, it's good to have a more holistic approach. So why don't you start by talking about all the different things that you do and have your hands into?
Yeah, we've got a lot of hats. We made a funny little graphic in the office last year that's like a little Swiss Army knife that's all the way open, and it's got like little labels of all the stuff that we do in the office around it, which is kind of good. Like it sometimes, it takes a minute to explain, and so then it sort of sounds insane. I can't decide if I'm a general specialist or I specialize in being a generalist. But there's, one of the things that I work in housing, right? And so housing and development is complicated and you got to know a little bit about a lot of stuff. And I think it has been, there are so many people out there like that. I think the other thing is, we've kind of been finding each other and banding together has been really satisfying. But I'm a licensed architect. I'm a licensed landscape architect. I checked this the other day so I can keep doing this humble brag. I'm the only dual licensed architect and landscape architect in the state of Arkansas.
Are you serious? Wow, you are literally one of a kind. Yeah, just with those two things, and you haven't even added on all the other things. Yeah, okay.
We found that out because they signed up for a new software that it doesn't work for you to have an account on both. And they just called the office and they were like, "You're the only person this doesn't work for, so just call once a year and you need to renew." You can do it manually. Is the only reason we know that. I'm the executive director for the Incremental Development Alliance, which is a national nonprofit that trains small developers. We train about 8,500 people in the last 10 years, our 10th year since founding. And we train small developers and the cities that let them. So what we call ecosystem partners, city leaders, elected officials, housing advocates, builders, people who think they might want to get into development, but they're not sure. I was a faculty member for a long time. I was on the board for a couple of years, joined as the executive director last year. I also have a practice, a design consultation practice. So I've got a team of 15, and I'm in that phase of business that I think lots of people who have established businesses, like when I tell them we're doing this, they're like, "Oh yeah, I remember that." We're scaling, and we're really intentionally and carefully going from like a team of 6 to like a team of 20. And it took about 2 years for me to even like wrap my head around what that was going to look like and how we were going to structure it and what those roles needed to be and how we needed to change and all the processes we were going to have to define. So we're building that business right now. And I'm a small developer. So I do new construction, small development. And then one of my specialties is I'll buy really big old houses and rehab them, soup to nuts. We replace the HVAC, we rewire the whole house, we take all the cracked, galvanized plumbing out and fully replumb them, insulate everything, kind of bring it up to modern standards, really do all of the systems updates that are so expensive and people have a hard time getting excited about, but really protect the houses for another, 50 to 100 years of good service. And then we do all the pre-finishes. So we don't usually do a new construction and a historic project at the same time. Those are sort of like background, one at a time. And then I do a lot of speaking nationally about housing and how we can fix stuff. And so I get really nerdy I worked for a bank for a long time. I'm from a banking family. So a lot of interest in finance and how we finance things and how we make things, compliant with all of our federal underwriting standards and how we use existing products to do a lot of this small developer work that we're training. And so, we're getting into finance has been the big one. The next thing that we're also talking about a lot right now is if we can, deep dive into my current hyperfixation is the way that local taxation laws are actually the most variable thing that we see in communities. Inked trains everywhere. So 32 states, 2 Canadian provinces since we started. And so we're always all over the place in really different communities. And like 90% of what people struggle with from a housing and development standpoint is actually like all the same everywhere. Like you can be a rural small town you can be in New England, or you can be like a really fast growing giant million-person town in the South, or you can be, a big mountain kind of booming company town. All of the problems are like 90% of them are the same. The thing that is really variable is how does the town pay their general fund and how do they pay for their schools? And what are all the little bizarre things that have come out of that from like a policy decision-making standpoint that like nobody is paying any attention to? So that's my current thing we're really interested in at IncDev is like making cities realize like all the weird decisions they're making around what they're promoting and discouraging based on what they're taxing.
Wow. Yeah. So this is why I let you do the bio rather than me. Because I need to add a couple things because you've been on planning commission before.
Oh yeah.
And you've been on the board of adjustments, right?
Yes.
Before. So you've got city bureaucracy, public, did you have to get appointed for?
Appointed.
Okay.
I don't think I could get elected to a public position, especially in my town.
Have you said you're in have you said where you're at?
I'm in Fayetteville, Arkansas. I've been here for 14 years. And
there's a lot going on there for people that don't realize it. Because Walmart's really cool there, community.
Right? Yeah. So the major state universities here we don't have a professional sports team in the state of Arkansas. And so our football team with the university here is like a professional sports team. So it's a big travel destination too. It's a hospitality town and it's a college town. It's up in the mountains. It's surrounded by national forest. And it's a really beautiful place. There's lots of hiking. It's been a really cool place since the 1800s. So there's lots of historic architecture, but it was a small, remote place for a long time. And then middle of the last century, a little company named Walmart was founded 30 minutes up the road. And in one of those, interesting domino effect things, Fort Smith wouldn't give Walmart some sort of, I don't know, incentive, permission, something, to relocate their headquarters there. So, which they wanted to move there to be on the interstate because their entire business is shipping logistics. And so they were up a mountain road, 2-lane winding through the Ozarks road in Bentonville, couldn't get it done. And so they, in one of their foundational decisions of the company, stayed in Bentonville. And so, they're the Fortune 1 company in the country. They're double the annual gross revenue of Amazon. And the family that owns them is individually 6 of the 10 wealthiest people in the United States. And they all live here. And it's a town of 30,000 people. It's a metro area of about 500,000. And so it's this really specific economy that also everybody that sells a product at Walmart has to have a high level office in Walmart. The people in charge of the Walmart account, which for a lot of companies in the United States is the bulk of their revenue. Cliff Bars, one silly example, right? 75% of the Cliff Bars that are sold in Walmart. And so their most important sales office is in Bentonville. And that's true for Nike and DreamWorks Studios and Starbucks. Wow. And, all of these companies that make products have offices here. And so we're this really bizarre little economy that has changed a lot since I moved here 14 years ago.
Yeah, it's growing really fast right now. Right.
It's growing very fast. We can't keep up. And we have the contractor culture and size of the town 10 years ago, which was half of the size that it was. And so, it's this real challenge of we are hemmed in by topography. Sewer capacity is really challenging. Our region's along a ridge line. And so we've got 14 sub watersheds, which for sewer and stormwater in a growing region that is made up of lots of small towns and it's really complicated. It's not one city government that is making all these decisions about growth. It's all of these different communities that were small towns, until recently. We joke, and this is not a joke. This is real. One of the towns that is, of our kind of 14, we've got 5 big towns and then, 9 to 11, depending on where you draw the boundaries, small towns. One of them is small enough. The mayor is also the dog catcher. It's, small towns dealing with these giant pressures of growth and these huge incomes and this it's an economy of really mismatched scales sometimes, which has been really interesting. But it does mean we've got all this education and we have all this money. If you have a great idea, you can usually find money to fund it. And so we've got a really interesting city government structure too, where we've got all these really educated people committed to being on and being active in city government. And so a lot of the stuff that Northwest Arkansas has been able to do has been because people are willing and excited to try stuff. And so, we can get projects with crazy variances through because people want to test it. And so there's a lot of good and there's a lot of bad. I love living here. And also development in a fast growing region is hard. It's a lot of pressure. People get scared. And there's this really big divide between people who have houses and don't want anything to change and people who don't have houses, and need something to change. And how we, meet the needs of both of them is really challenging on a day-to-day basis. And I'm taking a project here right now, a big PCD. And I had my hardest city council meeting I have ever had in 12 years of doing this. And I've taken some really tough projects through on Monday. So I might feel more salty than normal about that topic.
Oh, I'll be interested to hear about that. I actually want to jump into a little bit of that, but first I want to because maybe we're not as young as I like to think, but I still think that we're young, but you have so many, you've done so much already and kind of added things. I'm just kind of wondering, Were those things intentional from the beginning? Like, I wanted this, and this, or like, how has your kind of career unfolded professionally where you did end up in all of these different things and you kind of stitched them together in this really unique way?
This is a story I've told on podcasts before, so people may have heard this before. But I feel like I am young for where I am, but I also started early. So I'd say that my story as a developer started when I was 16. I went to college when I was 16 and was too young to live in the dorms. And so bought a house with my sister, and my parents helped and used my college savings to buy that house, and then renovated it all through school. And so, I had grown up with a really hands-on mom in a really rural place that was too small. I grew up a giant cattle ranch in western Oklahoma. Hours from anything. And she was in the middle of an oil boom when she moved there, and she couldn't figure out how to find anybody to come and work on house. She bought the only house in the market, couldn't find anybody to work on it. So just went and bought some books and taught herself to do construction. And so I grew up in a household that was, if you couldn't find somebody to fix your roof, you just went and fixed your roof and learned how to fix your roof. Doing minor electrical work was not a huge deal. And so worked on houses, flipped houses that I lived in, starting when I was 16. Graduated architecture school, got a master's in landscape. And so graduated from graduate school by the time I was 22, was dual licensed by the time I was 25. And so went out on my own in 2015. Same year IncDev was started, although I was not a part of it then. Big year. And so this is a big year, 10 years anniversary for both my company, which is called Flintlock, and for IncDev. And I think it was pretty accidental. I actually had a little bit of a hard time. I got the landscape degree because I graduated with an architecture degree in 2008. Wasn't really sure what to do with it. Nobody's hiring for that. Nobody's doing anything. And didn't know how to make, an impact in the world in a positive way. And so I actually bounced around a little bit. It felt like at first, trying to find what felt like a good niche. And then I really got excited about the hands-on nature of small development. I started my first land development. I had enough money to do a rental flip that I didn't live in, like 2013, 2014. Sold it in 2015, and that's the money that I had to start my company. And then a year later, had done well enough in my first year, had exceeded what I was expecting to do my first year. And so used that money to buy an acre and a half downtown and did my first land development deal. So rezoned it, lot split it, put in a sewer line, built out an alleyway in the middle of the property. And so turned what had been functionally two properties that were contiguous into 10 street-facing lots, and then a 12 townhouse, little courtyard project in the middle. And so I have been working on that since 2016, but kind of got into that because it was the next scale up. And I had a great opportunity. I would say I have been really opportunistic, generally about work. And so I wanted to learn more about planning, so I got on the planning commission, and I learned a lot more about planning and policy and politics and how to write zoning codes, as how much impact one word in one sentence can have. I wanted to, learn more about houses, so I worked on them like a little kid, takes apart a clock to see how it works. It has made me a better architect too. We take apart a lot of old houses, and so seeing what is still in good condition, what is not. I will not use blown cellulose insulation or fiberglass wall insulation because I've never opened up a wall that they're not wet and disgusting. Yep. And so we have really strong mineral wool wall.
That's what we use.
Ceilings. I love mineral wool wall insulation. Rock wool, Roxol. You guys, I love you. Your product is so cool.
That's funny. That is our insulation that we use, that I'm a huge advocate for multiple reasons.
It's fireproof. The soundproofing is really good.
It's literally rock and, basalt rock and slag, like metal, and so inorganic,
it's easier
breathable.
To cut. Breathable. Yep. Mice can't chew through it. Bugs can't come through it. Right. It's hydrophobic. So when you get some water,
it makes me sound smart. Yeah, it doesn't absorb water like a sponge.
Yeah, and then it runs down the face of it, and so you will get water vapor in your wall. Having something that is not just soaking it up, such a big deal.
So the funny thing is, I discovered it because I was trying to figure out how to insulate our brick masonry walls, within a mass wall system, and realizing you can't just put you don't want to put insulation in that seals anything, that water, mold, and spray foam. People don't know this. Spray foam, open cell, which is largely what's used, at least in here.
Yeah, closed
That
self-screw
stuff
is
soaks
expensive.
up water and it molds. And I'm not saying it's a bad material. It can be used in the right way, but like I love mineral wool. We put that between our Ys, which then translated into conventional wood framing too, when I realized just all the benefits. But
it's so great.
Yeah.
It's so great. I also love it. We do open cell up in a roof deck. So I feel really
that's
strongly,
what we do too.
Yeah, because it's on a slope. It can't hold water. It will let the water run through.
Roofs are pretty good at not getting, like, shedding water, especially, if you put the underlayment on.
Deal.
Yeah.
And moving into building science, which is a thing I feel like we could nerd out about a little bit too. What was one of the things I liked about doing development? It's one of the reasons I did new construction development at first is I wanted to test a lot of ideas we were trying to convince clients to do. And so it was really sort of an R&D project. And so we tested a lot of this stuff and found, my natural inclination towards crawl spaces, because that's what all of our old houses have, completely reinforced. I would never do anything on a slab unless there's some insane reason to do it. Being able to go in and pop a floor box in someplace because your electrician can just crawl in the crawl space and it's no big deal. Being able to fix a plumbing leak under a kitchen island without having to jack up the entire floor. Like the repairability of a crawl space is incredible. I feel really strongly about a closed crawl space. So closed crawl space, closed attic, where they're both part of the envelope. We insulated the edge of the crawl space, run a register into it. So it's got a supply, and then it's got really good, this queen lining. So it's waterproofed, and then it slopes to drain. So you slope the crawl space to drain, and then you run a perforated pipe at your low point to slope out of the house, gravity drain out, don't sump pump it. This queen over that so that the whole thing that's in the envelope is all sealed and insulated, but you've got a way for water that gets in there to get out. Ductwork down there, plumbing down there, all your ductwork in the envelope, because we put first floor down in a crawl space. We can put second floor ductwork in the floor truss between the two floors. And then all your ductwork is in the envelope of the building. Is the single most impactful energy efficiency update that we have been able to find. And in our properties that we've done that versus having a slab and then ducts up in an attic that's not insulated is a 40% difference in our product.
Wow.
Same unit, same everything, 40% difference in energy efficiency.
On your crawl spaces, do you sink them into the ground at all? Or are they really all above ground? You've got your grade and then crawl space where whatever it is, the code 30 inches or something. Do you sink them into the ground at all? So your house is it just basically raised off the ground by however high the crawl space needs to be?
Here's where our markets are a little bit different. I'm in the Ozarks. So if I put it at the minimum grade, above grade on the high side, I have 4 to 6 feet on the low side every single time.
Got it.
And so we usually have crawl spaces that you can walk into and have some storage in.
That's
on
really
one
nice,
side. Yeah. The flattest ones we've ever done, we still usually try to keep them up above grade. I like a slightly raised house anyway. A front porch looks better if you've got some stairs up into it. We generally can still get parking access pretty nicely. One of my other tricks that I really like that we've only done recently is when we have access, accessibility, age and place is a really important factor. What we like to do is, I'm going to get nerdy and sketch this on Post-it note for the camera here. All right. So we always do, we're a footer CMU,
yep.
Right? And so normally it means you're putting your trusses on top of the CMU.
Yep.
And so we need 12 inches below the wood truss for our soil, and it's an 18-inch truss. So yeah, we're up at about 30 inches, for your porch. If we get 6 inches at the door, it's only a couple stairs at the front porch. We have a couple houses that we've done though, where it's somebody in their 50s that wants accessibility. All right. So a new trick that we R&D'd recently and tested, and it worked great, is, okay, wait, I sketched it wrong. This feels like high pressure. I hadn't fully prepared myself for doing this sort of thing. Okay. So footer, 12-inch blocks on the bottom.
Yep.
And then we switch to 8. And we hang the truss on the inside of the wall with and it's sitting on little treated 2x4 runner.
Yep.
So that it's bearing on, and this is a bond
CMU.
beam. Yeah, it's a CMU bond beam that it's sitting on. And then we do a little gap, which is a great spot for mineral wool.
Yeah.
Or some, an air gap is going to work fine as long as you don't have contact between that truss and the CMU. But then you can pour your garage slab right up against that.
Yeah.
It needs it needs to bear, but you can have floor space and crawl space and garage slab all totally level for accessibility. And for us, this is going to be at grade. We can drain that crawl space at grade without a sump because we're going to have enough slope depending on where we're at the garage. But that's my new thing that we've done that has really opened up being able to drop that house lower and still have all the waterproofing work.
That's awesome. Do you not have to, is 12 inches the minimum you have to have between the truss and the soil? For some reason, I was thinking you had to have 30 inches everywhere so you could actually move around down there. What's the actual code?
You can't get down there if you don't have 30 inches. But for us, because we usually have a couple of feet of fall between houses, if we've got 12 to 18 on the high side, then it's, you can stand up on the low side often.
Got it. Okay.
And so our situation's a little bit different than you guys, where you probably do need 30 inches.
Right. I think that it's something about that because it's all flat. Okay.
Yeah. But, we've done, I for a long time had this rule of thumb that I felt like the porch floor shouldn't be more than 5 feet above the sidewalk. Somebody told me that rule of thumb at some point, the idea being eye level is above the porch floor, so it doesn't feel too high. So it's not above that. We have a ton of grade here. We've done some sites where, it's 120 foot deep lot, and we've got 18 feet of fall from one side to the other, from front to back. And so we've got some steep lots that we've worked on. That's abnormal, but 8 to 10 feet's not weird for us. That's pretty normal. 12 feet even is okay. And so with that really steep grade, we end up sometimes, right? If the back of the lot is higher than the street, if it's not front to back, right, which is easy, we got to walk out basement, it's fine. If it's back to front slope, that porch ends up really high sometimes. Yep. And we've had some really high porches that we were a little bit nervous about, and it's fine.
Yeah. And you have to work with the terrain that you have, but yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's one of the things that I find I think unique about your story, which I kind of pointed to earlier in the multidisciplinary aspect, but you really haven't let this idea of a career or vocation be your guide of I am an architect, I am a landscape architect, I am a developer, I am a builder. And I bring that up multiple times because I just think in 2025 that's still so common starting in school. It's you are this. And they society really wants to pinhole you here and then you go get your job and this is what you do. And so I find your story really freeing, I guess, to even hear for people where you're, and I've got I started off at KPMG and then I'm in the Peace Corps and running around the jungle somewhere and then apprenticing, but you can kind of stitch together your own profession and carve out your own really niche and then do really well. I think, it took me longer to get on my feet. It took me all of my 20s, but that's because I was making no money off in the Peace Corps and apprenticing and stuff like that. But I think that's a really cool aspect about your story and your career. It makes you so effective and interesting.
I think I actually did leave that one out. I do also have my GC license. I do GC my own projects only when it's the big historic houses are so specialty. No one else would care the same way that I do. No, and so I do. We have done fewer of them the last couple of years. I probably haven't done one in 2 or 3 years because they're very hands-on.
I've done a few historic homes back in 2020 and 2021. Yeah. We're doing a commercial remodel right now. Sorry. And I mean, they are the first ones I did. I mean, you learn a lot.
Yeah. Yes.
I lost money because I wanted to do it right, and just you get into it and you're wow. I would never buy a remodeled historic house from anyone unless it was someone like you, on spec.
I feel the same way.
Yeah, just never.
It's honestly worse if somebody has gone in and worked on it.
Absolutely.
The ones that I buy have not been touched in at least 50 to 60 years.
Yeah.
Because I want to know that I'm replacing all the systems.
Right.
The stuff that we have found and so here's the interesting thing too is, doing the development ourselves. It's also sort of here's my toxic trait, right? Is that like, I do just want to be involved in everything, and I have no problem being, in charge of everything. Like I'll just jump right in. Like somebody's going to mess it up. That might as well be me. And so our development projects, I am the owner and the investor and the architect and the general contractor. And just like, I'm the only person to mess stuff up. The butt stops here, but it does mean that we can go in and do these like crazy complicated projects, that you could never coordinate all the way through.
No.
But the work ends up so good because there's no overhead of coordination between all of these different groups trying to do all these different things. It's not really a replicable or scalable model. It's been the thing that I also figured out.
That's true. Like it's not infinitely scalable, but I feel you. I mean, because occasionally we take on GC jobs, just as the GC, but we're also design build architecture. We don't have we don't do landscape. We're very involved with landscaping, but we're not landscape architects. We're pretty picky. Just recognizing when we do the GC jobs, we're not the architect. It's like, I cannot believe how much it slows it down. And even if they're great, I'm not even talking. So if you're talking about a bad architect, that's one thing. But even if you got a great architect, it's like you're in the field, you do something, and then you got to like stop and literally go to the architect, and then they got to go to the owner, and you got to go to the right thing and paperwork and blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, oh, and then 2 weeks have gone by and you're like, I knew what we needed to do and could have made that decision in the moment. And when we're doing our own stuff on design build, whether it's on spec or remodels or development, it's amazing the speed at which you can go. And so like the design build workflow, a real design build workflow, I think is just so valuable.
One of the ways that we are trying to figure out how to scale that, because it's one of the things that I like doing the most. The thing that's really, calling back a little bit to what you were saying a minute ago, I do think that being really unconfined by like the societal expectation of career is really helpful. And just doing the thing that makes sense right then and doing the thing that makes sense, the year later, it's all going to be different all the time. And all of us are just making all of this up.
Really, you're an entrepreneur is what you are. Like, you're an entrepreneur because you're like, let me just pioneer like whatever the next thing is because I want to do this thing and we're going to.
Yeah, whatever the problem is, like we can just dig in and solve it. I've got a colleague here in Northwest Arkansas that I really like and respect who, how salty are we allowed to be on this podcast?
Completely.
What's our audience?
Yeah, you can be as salty as you want.
So, like the Ted Lasso believe up above the door that this is like the motto of that, right? So like they have that equivalent at their company. But instead of believe, it's fucking figure it out because their whole ethos is like, I don't know, I would be Googling it. Can you like figure it out? You might be wrong. I might be wrong. Just go figure it out. And so I think that approach to, I don't know, go figure it out. It has been, I would say, like the underpinning of none of this is rocket science. Every single thing that we touch and like, it's all specific and it's all complicated. Building code is complicated. Zoning code is complicated. Construction techniques are complicated. None of them are rocket science. Like if you sit down and you're like dedicated and you like figure it out, anybody can figure this stuff out and then start to see the links between it, which I think is where it gets cool. But that design build, it teaches you so much stuff. Also, like you're talking about the timeline of the project, but I also want to reinforce to listeners too, like the timeline of your learning is so much faster because you're just seeing 1,000 decisions and how they all impacted each other, being on site and seeing how trades interact. And if, oh man, we had our plumber come in before our HVAC guy and they're in the way of the ducts and we can't move that drain over. You're seeing 1,000 things all at once doing the design build version that just take you years in an architecture office to pick up on. And by doing the design, right, and trying to get to this really precise design and vision and then try to implement it in the field, you're also getting all this experience as a contractor that would take you years to understand working with really good designers, trying to understand that translation and execution of an idea that's good. So I think that design build model is actually one of the things that I like the most, but is like the least scalable because it's just me on site making decisions with tradespeople that I had relationships with for 12 years, that we have a lot of mutual trust. And we know a shorthand of what we're trying to get to and how to get there. And so it's actually one of the biggest things that we have launched this year as part of kind of that growth of company is launching an internship program and really trying to intentionally train a new generation of people. So we've got a mix of, we've got a civil engineer, we've got a landscape architect, we have 3 people with an architecture backgrounds. They're all young women, and we're cross-training all of them in all of it.
That's amazing.
You've got to do interior design, even if you're a civil engineer. You have to go and figure out site grading, even if you're an architect. Because part of this too is also like all of we've got these weird false divisions between stuff. And you got to know how all of it works to make good decisions for your slice.
Gosh, it's so it reminds me of 2 things. It's funny because I'm on a similar trajectory. I think we've got 6 people right now.
Yeah.
And I think we will be growing to 20, not in the next like 2 years.
Don't hire your 7th person until you're ready. Everything changed.
I hear there's those little scales like, and then it's like, oh, the next thing suddenly, and then I hear 20 is actually kind of like, once you get like 20 is something, and then beyond that, it's like 20, 50, completely different business even.
Yeah. No, we're at 15 right now.
Yeah.
16 on Monday. We need a new person starting, and it's a completely different company than we were at 6 or at 10.
That's
been really humbling.
I believe it. I would actually like to talk to you more about that at some point. Especially as we kind of grow our own business.
Yeah.
But what you were saying reminded me of 2 things. I don't know if you've heard this before, but I heard this a long time ago, like that the best rough carpenter, so framer, is a former trim carpenter.
Yeah.
Because the idea is they actually understand what's coming after them and the problems that they create, but you actually want them to go fast. You want to know where they can be rough and where they can't be rough or don't want to be rough. And so it's kind of the same thing with the design build, and especially when you add development. So it's like develop, design, build. You're like, I understand how all the pieces go together, like how things get financed and appraised and sold and comps and banked
marketability
and marketability.
Like if you haven't been in charge of property management and leasing buildings and selling buildings, and you haven't walked through stuff and heard people's complaints about like stuff you poured your heart and soul into, and they're like, ugh, why doesn't it have a second full bathroom? And I'll be like, it's
I always build too small of closets.
House.
I always build too small of closets because I'm like, I've never had a walk-in closet. Who needs a walk-in closet in a 2,000 square foot house? Well, in Oklahoma, you better have a walk-in closet, and it better be the size of a freaking bedroom.
Like, if you were selling small houses to college students, every single one of those students better have their own full bathroom, or else. That
is hilarious. Because even in my historic house, we have 3 bedrooms and 1 bathroom with 2 kids. and I don't have a walk-in closet.
3 bathrooms. And not a walk-in closet.
That's funny.
But like the marketability is also part of it, because like we can tease about it, but like our business is building housing for other people, which means we have to care what they think. And so you got to think about what they want all the way back at the design phase to be able to get it to appraise, to be able to get the comps, to be able to build it, to be able to sell it, rent it.
Right.
The carpenter analogy is perfect.
Yeah,
that's exactly right.
I've always remembered that one. I'm going to share a little trick we use at Building Culture. So if you're designing a house, you have to have egress windows or egress in any bedroom, for example. And the problem with that is egress windows are very large, especially if it's a double hung window or something like that. And because of design constraints, sometimes we want a smaller window if it's in a dormer or just for the hierarchy of the elevations. Well, a really cool trick that we use with our Sierra Pacific windows is we'll take something from their urban casement line, and we'll put what's called a piano hinge on it. And so rather than kind of a normal casement that kind of slides open where only part of the window is open, this is almost like a door hinge. And so the entire window opens, and you can meet egress with a 2-foot by 4-foot window, a 2040 window. It's the smallest possible egress window anyone makes. And that's a nice little design trick. If you're as nerdy as I am, you will actually think that's really cool. So check out Sierra Pacific Windows. And if you are in the state of Oklahoma, check out One Source Windows and Doors. We at Building Culture use both of them regularly. And something else you were saying reminded me of just something I've been thinking about this past year. There's, especially as like growing a business, which my mind is just kind of in a different place, as I'm still in the details, but I'm less in the details than I was in some ways, because I'm trying to put together these other things and grow the business and all that.
Yep.
But Brian Chesky, who's like the CEO of Airbnb, he was on did this like founders mode thing at Y Combinator not long ago, and he was talking about like how all the Harvard business schools are like totally wrong, because they're like, the CEO just needs to be like the manager, and then you need to hire a bunch of managers, and they manage all the specialists. And his point was, how are you supposed to manage anything that you don't know how it actually goes together? Yep. And so they're so focused on like their product, like, and the managers they promote are literally like product people that literally turn into managers. And then even him as CEO, like everyone kind of like he's head of product in a sense, and everyone kind of like reports to him, and so he's like super involved. It's kind of like an Elon Musk or a Jeff Bezos or even a Steve Jobs or something that was super involved with the actual product, which actually helped them. Like they were CEOs and building the business, but they were like product focused people.
I would call that like a technical founder, which I think is one of the things that I'm trying to wrap my head around too, is like, as you know, one of the things that's really humbling about building a business is that as you switch from one scale to another, you realize that everything that is wrong with your business is something that is wrong with you as a person, personality wise.
So true. It's so true. And like there's no one else to blame. Like everything that goes wrong, it's your fault.
Totally. But one of the things that like is true at a business of 6, 5 or 6 people, you can still be a technician, right? So there's a like book from the 80s, which I actually really liked, kind of business book wise. It's called The E-Myth, that talks about like a technician, right, is the person that is that technical skill set that is executing whatever the business is doing. And then a manager is managing the work and designing process, right? And they're 2 really different things, right? And then the entrepreneur is the person like going out and having the big ideas and like getting everybody into trouble with too much work because they've got all these things that they're trying to do. And everybody is like a little bit of all 3, but that at some point you can't grow a business if you want to be the person that's doing all the technical work.
Right.
You have to teach other people to do the technical work. And then you have to learn to be a manager, which is a thing it's a real personal growth opportunity for me.
There you go. Everything's a personal growth opportunity.
I'm really growing. I've been doing a lot of growing.
Yeah, me too. Through lots of pain and mistakes. Which actually I want to come back to the business stuff in a little bit because this is a pretty interesting topic. But one of the things that is I want to get into first is one of my friends who kind of brought on as a partner on one of our developments, he moved down from DC not long ago, and he was talking about terraforming Oklahoma City. And I immediately was like, have you read Red Rising? And it was just a fiction, like sci-fi book.
I've
and he was
read
like,
Red Rising.
Okay,
it's great.
So you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. And for anyone listening, terraforming, they're going to Mars and terraforming it with helium-3 to make it habitable. And so he's talking about terraforming Oklahoma City into a habitable place for developers for good work to unfold. And it's the way we think about it too. And I know you do. And this is what I want to get into about Fayetteville and kind of all the different things that you've done over time. And even other people in Fayetteville doing this, where it's not just you doing work in the private sector as an architect, as a landscape architect, as a GC and developer. That's great. But that's kind of like the hardware part. And then there's the culture part. And the relationships part. And then the kind of playing the long game of changing codes, being on city council, knowing your counselors, knowing how to talk to people, knowing how to fight decisions that are, come from city staff or something like that are incorrect. And I know you've done a lot of that, and a lot of other people. I mean, like Matthew Petty's there too, I think, right? There's a bunch of cool people in Fayetteville, like making it, terraforming Fayetteville. And what I think is so cool about that is like you're so invested in your farm, and that's kind of how I feel about Oklahoma City. Is like we might do some consulting and stuff outside, and I know you do Inc. Dev, but like you're like, we want to make this just the greatest place. Yeah. And then also it helps other people do great development too. So could you kind of start talking? This is a broad question, but could you talk about where Fayetteville started, and kind of where it is now, and kind of your role in that, and the things that you guys have done, and even some of the people around you have done that have worked towards terraforming Fayetteville into a great human scale, beautiful city?
I think there's always part of the story that like I always feel self-conscious about not starting with the like, okay, well, your first step that you should do is get a couple of billionaires that want to make your place a really nice place to live. Because the reality is like Northwest Arkansas, we had so many cool people doing so many things that are 0% funded by that. But the backdrop of everything that I think is happening in Northwest Arkansas is Walmart was competing with Google and Amazon for talent coming out of top schools. And as they were growing, 10 or 15 years ago into making a full e-commerce transition, and retail changed so much in the last 20 years, they were really having to compete for new employees in a way they never had to do before. And one of their big business model decisions was everybody had to live in Northwest Arkansas. And I moved here from DC. I was in DC for a number of years after grad school. I was working there doing multifamily housing mostly, and then landscape architecture at a really cool little boutique firm. Moved to Northwest Arkansas. And when I came in 2012, you couldn't buy alcohol between 9 p.m. Sunday and like 10 a.m. Monday morning. And restaurants were 100% closed Sunday after church lunch until sometimes Wednesday. And so on Sundays, there was nothing like I moved from DC where I could like order sushi and have it delivered at 2 a.m. to my house. And even in the early 2010s, into a town that like there was nothing to do except go to church or go hiking on Sundays. Walmart might be open, but like some of the big chain grocery stores were closed on Sundays. And that was so hard as a culture for recruiting people to move from San Francisco and recruiting people to move from Brooklyn. Like that was really tough. So the family made a really big decision about, they called it the Home Region Initiative, that they spent a bunch of money making this place cool. And so we've got a world-class art museum designed by Moshe Safdie. And there's an arm that just does restaurant backing. And they've done a bunch of advocacy so that you can buy booze on Sundays now and restaurants are open. And, it has become a cool, easy place to live, because there was a group of people with like an infinite amount of money being really dedicated to making it a cool place to live. And so it could be done in a different way, but I don't want somebody who's like in a community that doesn't have that kind of resources to be like, oh, we're not doing a good enough job. We should be able to replicate this exactly. Like, that's why I'm saying that, is I'm saying that to give people the out of like, our solution is not 100% replicable. Although there are also a ton of places that do actually have those families that have enough wealth that has been generated in that community that they can invest, right? Like you've got plenty of oil money in Oklahoma City, that you've got plenty of families that could write a check and make a change, but that's what it takes. And you have to have those locals who are invested in making those changes. And so, a lot of our changes came out of not just that investment in all of the advocacy policy, law changes that it took, right? Which is identifying the specific problem of your place, which for us was this like holdover Baptist culture that was like, you shouldn't be doing anything except going to church and going to work, and turning that into a place that people wanted to live. And so it was a really specific problem, and then finding the solution, having the like resources to do it. This is sort of step one, but step two, they really did early on, was they invested in sending city staff to CNU.
Who invested? The city?
The Waltons did.
Wow.
And so they have, their family foundation sends 30 to 50 people a year to CNU.
Oh my gosh.
And it's mayors and planning commissioners and city council members. And they are really trying to say there is a sort of best practices way of developing a place that people like, that has worked really well nationally. There's a way to learn about it. And without this whole ecosystem being on the same page, having a common language, having a common understanding of what we're trying to do, it's really hard to do this stuff. And so we've got this culture of my like baseline city planner at one of these small towns, like has heard of and probably worked with DPZ and like understands why we're trying to get utilities into the pavement. And like they may disagree with how we do it, but like I don't have to explain the baseline understanding of where we're at. We're all on the same page. We're just disagreeing about the best way to get to
they get the why.
A commonly identified goal.
That is profoundly unique. I wish a wealthy family in every city were to send city staff.
Yes.
Because that is a huge problem. People don't understand how much power city staff has. Even if a city council is on board, even if city planning is on board with senior, if the utility departments and public works and engineering and things and fire are not on board with the same ultimate vision of where are we going and why, it doesn't matter. And then city councilors aren't going to overrule their staff when their expert staff is telling them something. They don't want to like put their, neck out there. I'm kind of speaking generally, but boy, that is
so
very cool. And man, if I could make that happen, I would make that happen real fast.
It's replicable, though, I think is the other thing I want to say, right? So I want to start being like very frank about the ways that we've been successful, some of which is replicable and some of which is like not immediately replicable. The thing that I think any community can do, and kind of tying into how IncDev, right? IncDev has the first place that we had more than one faculty member was Northwest Arkansas. Matthew Petty was a faculty member before me. He brought me in. We really leaned in as an organization to training ecosystems, not just small developers, by 2017. Because one of the things that we were seeing is how impactful that was in Northwest Arkansas. And so our trainings are based completely around building that common language, that common understanding, that common familiarity with strong towns and with Urban 3 and with all of these really, things that our CNUers are going to think of as like really baseline, but there are people who've never heard of any of this. And if you start talking to them 10 chapters in, assuming they know all of that, it's really off-putting. And so starting from laying a baseline of common education, advocacy, information in your community is something that is super replicable. One of the things that we did early on as a company is I had some of our interns the first couple of years. I was really interested in our zoning history because on the first year on the planning commission, I was like, well, we just have to change the zoning code. There's all the rest of this bullshit is meaningless unless we change the zoning code. And so I'm not going to sit in 58 committee meetings about what initiatives and committees and task force we should have. Until we change the zoning code, all of this is just like mental masturbation. Stop. Go change the zoning code and come back to me in some way, which doesn't even mean you have to fully replace it. But you can make tweaks and changes that will make a positive impact tomorrow, often changing a couple of words, right? And so Norman, Oklahoma, Matt Peacock, who I went to architecture school with, huge shout out. Matt Peacock was on city council led eliminating parking minimums by changing the word required to recommended.
Oh, we saw this. This was in the news lately, which is just
so
amazing.
It's so good. It's so good. And you
because
can do
by the way,
that
city councilors, no developer that's going to stay in business is going to build something that doesn't have enough parking in their own business.
Yes. The bank won't even let you. So let the person who's running that business figure out how much parking they need. But that kind of change is so accessible to people, and your council and your commission can make those changes all the time. And so that was a really impactful thing for me, getting on council and being like, okay, we have to do this, which means we have to explain to people why we have to do this. And so I started in 2015 doing pretty in-depth research and education in my community. So I went and there was one copy of our urban renewal plan printed in paper in our library resource center, the references section. It was the only copy that was left. So we digitized it. And we digitized all of our original zoning maps. And I went back and found all of the planning commission and city council meeting minutes where they talked about when they passed our zoning code. Because our zoning code is still 80% what was in there in that 1970s zoning code rewrite. And we pulled out all those key quotes, right? And I talk about them and present them in town all the time. There are people
when you say you present it in town, what do you mean?
Times.
Like in front of city council, public comments, or
we put all of those documents, all of that research work is in one shared Dropbox folder that we host. And we send it out to the whole planning staff, and every city council member has it, and the mayor has a copy. And so we've got all this information that otherwise all the Sanborn maps, everything that we could find that's useful about this stuff is pulled together. And then there's a presentation in there. When we are doing, I end up getting asked to, I was at the housing crisis task force last night, being extra salty. And that kind of stuff, when they're like, hey, will you come and talk to us for 10 minutes? I always just do slides. It's the same, couple of slides that I'm pulling from stuff, and come with more information than people are expecting you to have. Come with data, come with receipts. Our urban renewal plan did a survey of our zoning code and found that there was a surplus of affordable housing. There was about the right amount of middle class housing, and there was an extreme shortage of luxury housing. And luxury housing wasn't illegal to build. People just weren't building it. They were choosing not to, even though it's legal. And so the 1970 zoning code rewrite, they exclusively had all this really junky segregationist stuff in there, which is like very helpful to be able to be like, if you are arguing for RSF4 in my town specifically, let me tell you what that was written to accomplish. And then let's see if you want to promote it. And even just saying at city council meetings over and over again in public comment, get to where you've got a 3-minute section of slides that you can give during a public comment section about tangential things. You can go and give slides at your city council meeting anytime you want.
When did you start doing that out of curiosity?
Probably when I was on the planning commission. And I realized, like, you sit through those meetings and you're like, anybody can come and talk to us.
Yep.
And most of the people who are coming to talk to us are coming and saying insane things.
Right.
And so not everybody, but like if you sit through a bunch of those meetings, right? A lot of our meetings are like 6 to 8 hours long and they'll have 30 public comments. And like half of the people are saying stuff that you're like, you're on camera. You just said where your address is. You're on TV, man. They're recording this. Do you want to rethink what you're saying? And so you also realize like the bar for public comment is like underground. So just go and exceed it. And it'll be so surprising to people that have to sit through all those meetings all the time to have somebody like come and cogently be like, okay, so here's the backstory with receipts on screen. Here's my slides. It's really impactful. And so I did that enough. And a big part of my job is entitlement. So I have to present to councils a bunch for work anyway. So I can also like tuck it into reasons I'm there, right? I'm asking for a rezoning and here's why. And the current zoning is RSF4 and here's the history of that. And we don't want to take that history forward. So we're asking for this rezoning for XYZ reasons. There's a lot of like professional reasons I'm doing it too. I'm sometimes just annoying, but sometimes it's, justified professional reasons. But we did that so many times now. Even people who like are NIMBYs calling in against a project will call in and be like, I mean, I know it's RSF4 and I know how problematic that is, and I'm like, I'm making progress. Like I'm doing it. Even people that are calling to defend it know that they can't say they're just wholeheartedly defending it. They have to have all these other reasons, which means we're like starting to move the needle on people understanding what this like baseline that they think is normal is that actually is not like a tablet handed down by Moses. It's like this bad idea experiment that got done in the 1970s, the total opposite of the way we've ever built cities before, that is getting a really bad result everywhere and that we could just get rid of.
I think that's really empowering what you're talking about because it's funny if you're not used to going in front of city council, you're like, city council, like it's just so confusing. It wasn't that long ago where I was like, huh, what? Yeah. But now because I'm having to go before them more and more, I've started thinking like, man, I just need to go randomly at the exact same thing what you're talking about. Is just I'm going to start going and taking 3 minutes to not berate because this is what one of the counselors told me is, you get a bunch of crazy people. I mean, this is, I won't say what counselor this is or where. But like, so if you can just get up and cast like, hey, here's what we want, like a positive vision and blah, 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 like that can go over really well. And over time, especially if you're producing a positive body of work for people to see and realize, that takes time. But I think anyone can do that in any city, across the country. And it's so important if you want to do this kind of work. I think because I don't think people recognize like how powerful city council is. Like, everyone's worried about the federal government and the state government a little bit behind that. And don't get me wrong, those are important and I care about those too. Your city councilors, whether it's 5 of them or 9 of them or whatever, they run your city. They have so much power. And most of them, I don't mean this in like a bet, but they're not they're not educated about these things. They're not expert urbanists. They come from different professional backgrounds. Maybe they're even, politicians, whatever. And they've got a lot of people coming to them about a lot of different things. Yep. And if you don't come and talk to them, and so this is kind of the like soft power part in the influence and culture and education that like we want to be doing. And I'm really inspired by how much you've done and want to continue doing that. So really bravo to you for that. But also I encourage anyone else that's kind of like trying to do this infill work. It is a long game. It's not, let me go do my project. It is a long game.
And you have to, part of what Inkden talks about too in our trainings is you have to be a person that is dedicated to building your positive reputation and trust. Like, you can't do a project that you're trying to like get something over on the city and then have the next one go well. And so there's so much long game. There is so much reputation and trust building. The more that you can be known as somebody that cares, that is going to be reasonable, within reason. And because I think too, I have to acknowledge too, I can be abrasive just as a
Me
person.
too.
Like I have such strong feelings about everything, and right, like
my temperature goes up real quick.
Yeah. I burn real hot just as a, like, when I'm really excited about it, I'm so excited about it. I'm so committed. We had a city engineer leave his job recently. And when I found out, I was like, ooh, that might've been partially me. I might've contributed to that. I might've pushed him over the edge. I'm so sorry, Josh. I'm so sorry. But I think, you have to build up all those positive, you got to put the deposits in the bank by being the person that is volunteering on boards. I did it before I had kids. So actually my reaction to the first Trump election in 2016 was being like, I can't focus on national politics this year. I have to be able to put some of my extra horsepower into caring about my local community and feeling like I'm making a difference. And so that's when I got most involved. Like I was going to stuff for work, but I got on the planning commission in 2016 and I was on like 5 boards that next year. I got very busy doing stuff. I didn't have kids yet, and could go in the evenings and do that. And you have to put the time in to be known as somebody that's going to volunteer, that's going to care, that's going to be good for their word, who's going to, when they make mistakes, own it and say it and try to fix it. And I think you also have to be really consistent. And so one of the things that I'm going to give as an example is we had a project that I was really proud of. We took 3 oversized 50s lots. They were in our historic district. They had 2 really not great, 60s split level houses on them that had not great stuff going on. Like it wasn't a great existing start. They were really oversized. And so we took them and we got a rezoning, explaining, showed like a little diagram being like, okay, well, if you have 3 lots, here's what they have to cost. And so then here's what a house on them has to cost. And as we try to provide workforce housing, that's 300% AMI is the only thing we can build on this. So if you let us rezone, I can make 10 lots out of it. And then I can have 10 houses that each sell for this. And that's 120% AMI. Like have this really dumb PowerPoint set of graphics about like what the math is and why we were asking. And, really tried to do this cool workforce housing project. Looks like it's 5 duplexes. So it looks like 5 big historic houses, but it's 10 duplex townhouses, parking in the back, met all of our stormwater needs, met all the codes, did all the things. We were so proud of that project. One of the neighbors absolutely hated it. We had 168 Facebook posts about how bad it was in like a year that tagged the mayor every single time. And then they finally got done. They sold. 3 of the 10 buyers immediately turned around and tried to make them Airbnbs. And we had neighbors coming out being like, you said this was going to be workforce housing. Like, and now we've got like football weekend, Airbnb, investor properties. Thanks, but no thanks. And so we have to have a hearing for our short-term rental licenses. And so I personally took time off. I got a babysitter to go up to City Hall during the hearings for the short-term permits. And I went up and said, I asked special permission to build this for workforce housing. And that's what we meant it to be. And you have a permit process for a reason. And you can, and I would encourage you to say no, because that's not why these were built. And that was made clear to the buyers when we built them. And so this isn't the intention. The city has the power to do this. And as the architect of views, you have my support because that's not what we were trying to do. And so, that has some political negative ramifications sometimes, but it also has some really positive ones that like people need to be able to count on you trying to do the right thing for your community. And you just have to show up to a lot of meetings, which is free. Like I think a lot of times with IncDev, people feel like they have to have all this money and all this time and all these resources to make a difference. And like you can show up to meetings for free. And you have to.
And that's a cool story. And I think it does completely build trust. And I think that's what's lost on all this, whether it's people thinking they have to have money or it's just kind of about the thing that you do. So much of this, once again, comes back to relationships and building trust, which I'm curious because I've had, you mentioned burning hot a little bit, which I do too. I joke with this, Matt Hayes, who's, architect on my team, director of architecture construction, that came on board 3 years ago. He's a little more even keeled. So when he gets upset, I'm like, oh, that must have been a really annoying meeting. But what have you done, or, maybe situations, and I don't know, maybe it's hard to answer, but I've had issues with city staff, and I won't say like which municipality in Oklahoma, where I'm going like, at this point, I don't know how to work with you. You won't respond to my emails. You literally won't listen to this. You won't listen to that. Like, how have you successfully managed that? And frankly, part of the thing that I'm getting is like, I'm realizing to do this, you want to be trustworthy. You want to build positive relationships. Also, you're literally going to make enemies and people that don't like you. And at least I think that's from where I'm landing, because I'm just going, okay, well, at this point, and I can't let this person get in the way of all this project. So I'm going to have to get a little tough. And, how I'm guessing you've dealt with stuff like this before.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts or how you've managed that over time?
I mean, I have thoughts, but like, they're not really advice.
No. Right.
Like that has been one of the things about, like, this is going to sound dumb. Let me say, before I say it, I know that this is going to sound stupid, but it was really hard for me becoming an adult and realizing that I couldn't do, if I did the right thing, and if I did what I thought was fair and just and right, and if I was being a good person, that there would still be people who didn't like me. That was really hard for me.
Boy, it took me a long time to learn that too. This is kind of funny. I feel like
Yeah. And so I think that it was probably even within the last year or two, and it's still a thing that I struggle with, if I'm being really honest. It's a thing that I hate when we get sideways with somebody. And it happens, right? We have professional disagreements with people. We have a couple of people that we used to work with all the time and love that we've gotten into what I think might be unresolvable professional disagreements and can't work together anymore. I hate that as a person, right? Again, to say something else stupid, I'm a Libra. I'm all about balance and beauty and harmony. And part of the reason I get really hot in conflict is I don't want to be in conflict. I'll do everything possible to keep the peace and to do the right thing. And so if somebody insists on going on the mattresses, man, am I going to be mad about it?
Yeah.
Which, is not the most helpful way to approach it. But with city staff specifically, I would say I have 3 different approaches. Approach 1 is really dedicatedly try to build a personal relationship and common ground. And I would say about 30% of the time that works, right? That you can get to a place that you aren't going to agree all the time, but it can be kind of funny, right? And for both of you. So you can acknowledge okay, we're going to butt heads about this, but we can go have a beer afterwards and everybody will be okay.
I was about to ask that actually, specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ask some of them to a coffee or beer, a lunch?
For sure. The thing that is tricky, okay, I want to say this. It's harder, I think, maybe, being 30 and female and asking male city engineer to go get a beer. It's harder to have that land in the hey, can we go talk about work and build it? Can we go talk about this thing that went badly? It's possible, but I will say it feels like it's a thing I've really had to learn how to pull off in the way that I mean it. Yes. I also actually think having kids has been helpful for me in my town because I now see city staff as much at soccer games and the playground as I do. When I was on planning commission, we would always, as a commission often go get beers after, a meeting that ended early. And sometimes city staff would come and sometimes applicants and the public would come, right? There's a old, kind of towny spot that's really big, giant tables, huge and open, really close to City Hall. And so it's a place that people would go. And so that was a good opportunity to kind of in groups, ULI and those kinds of groups that do social type setting events, I think are also really helpful because you can go and have more of a personalized conversation with people. I think that there's that these aren't magic numbers, but there's about a third of the time that you can build enough of a social relationship that when you butt heads, you can get there. When that doesn't work, there's about 30% of the people that I just coexist with, but like I am trying not to pick a fight. I am always making sure my I's are dotted and my T's are crossed, and they're never going to catch me doing like I'm always making sure there's nothing they can get me on. But we are like tense, two predators staring across the plains at each other, neither one of them moving. Then I have some small percentage that are just like full on nemesis level, like mutual nemesis. If I have 3 people in my city that like my city staff specifically, that if they see our projects come through and they get assigned to those projects, it will take us 6 months long to get a permit. I had a project where, to give an example of what this nemesis like relationship is like, I'm like, it's people that I think would probably like hit me with their car if they thought they could get away with it. That's it. That's what it feels like. That's the vibes. We've got one of them that we had drawn moving a power line pole. There was a pole that was outside of a easement. And so we negotiated with this is a client project. I was the designer. Because I'm the architect and the landscape architect, we're often doing the site planning drawings and the utility drawings and the architectural drawings. So we can coordinate. I want a 20-inch eave here, so I need to move that power line over for setbacks from my building. So the site plans have moving power lines. Negotiated it with SWEPCO, who's our power company. They're coming out. It's outside the easement. It's an old pole. They were fine. They moved it. It's shown in our permit plans. The fire setback, the setback from the building, from the lines is determined by where the line is. They get done. We're 8 months into construction. I get a phone call that one of our city staff has come out and geolocated the pole. And it's 8 inches off of where I've shown it on my plan, as installed by a third-party subcontractor from the power company, like not someone I have any control or inspection or purview over. And it's a 12-inch pole that's 8 inches away from where I showed it on a 1-acre site. And I was like, how'd you even find that? Like what level of digging are you doing to find a third-party contractor installing a power pole 8 inches away from where it's supposed to be? So I have to really admit that I'm a real, acquired taste, and there are some people that would not recommend working with me. And he is one of them.
This might sound weird, but like it's a little bit encouraging to hear this because I actually don't like conflict either. I want to get along with people. I want to go build these beautiful places that everyone can celebrate, and
I'm trying to make the world a better place,
and then it's taken me a while because I just almost confused by it and try to be nice, try to be collaborative, try to be nice, and I'm realizing well, that's not working anymore.
Sometimes
I've got someone that can't
work.
look at me. It appears like they can't make eye contact with me.
Yes,
and I'm like, one of the difficult things about government is I believe in good governance. I imagine you believe in good governance too. The problem is like some of the people that I've had to work with and continue to, it's like, if this was in the private sector, I would have fired them so fast if they treated me like this, But
the thing about government, though, is somebody is in charge and could fire them. And all you have to do is figure out who that is.
Have you done that?
I'm working on it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a sad, but like, I mean, people
have. There are 2 people that I have this relationship with in the city of Fayetteville the last 10 years, and I've gotten 2 of them fired.
Yeah. Interesting. Well,
not by doing anything mean.
No, you're just trying to get a project through.
In charge of in charge of firing them, what they're actually like.
Right.
Just telling with evidence, finding that like perfect example story with something in writing that it can be proven, and then making sure that the person in charge of knowing how that person's doing a work is aware of that. And often too, the thing I want to say is city governments are full of absolutely wonderful people who also are trying to change the world for good. And it's not better for them to have that kind of person working there. Like, it's not better for the rest of the city staff. And I can guarantee you are not the only person having that experience with somebody on staff who's not great. And so I think that's one of the other things that's useful is like part of the reason Inked Up trains people in cohorts is that it is easier if you have a bunch of other people that you can be like, are you guys also having this problem with this person? And if there are 10 of you that can go and be like, okay, guys, we're going to have to reassign this person if you want anything to happen. Like, all of us have tried, all of us are having the same, problem. This is not a personality issue of one person not getting along with them. Like, this is a problem for everybody.
Boy, this is interesting. I could keep going on this for a while, but this is actually really helpful to hear. So thank you for kind of sharing candidly about some of this stuff. Just getting back to a little bit of business stuff before we wrap up here. As you're growing, I'm just kind of curious from like a business perspective. What has that been like going from 1 to 6 to 15 people? Like, what have been some of the biggest challenges for you personally and like growing a team?
I would say I have been the biggest challenge to me personally in growing a team. I didn't want to do that. I really wanted to be a sole proprietor. I didn't think I was going to be good at being a leader. And I didn't know how to do it. I had never really, I didn't have a lot of good models of people that I had worked under that I'd seen how they did that well. And so I didn't really feel equipped or super interested in doing it. I got my team of 6 accidentally. When I started having babies, I was a sole practitioner. And so there was not any opportunity or support to take time off. And so when I got pregnant the first time, I was, a sole practitioner working on some big contracts. I was working on a really big city contract that took a number of months to finalize signing. And I was really worried. I love my city. They're awesome. This is not a complaint. I was really worried if they found out that I was pregnant, then they wouldn't sign the contract with me because there was nobody else to do the work. And, I'm the South. And so I hid that I was like married and hid that I was pregnant for 7 months. And, signed the contract and then was like, okay, so I will be on maternity leave 2 months from now. So sorry. Oops. And really realized, I ended up taking like a 2-week maternity leave. And that wasn't sustainable. And so I partnered together with 2 other female sole proprietors, and we, sort of signed on to be backup for each other. We were going to share staff. We bought a building together. And, there was this plan of kind of this shared services cooperative so that each one of us, as we needed time off, had somebody to just pass projects to back and forth. And there was somebody to fill in when you were gone. But there's not like a soft way to tell the next part of the story. One of the partners died really suddenly, and it was awful. It was brutal. She was a good friend, and she was nice, and it was terrible. She had a 5-year-old at the time. And so I inherited like a group of people who had been working for 3 of us. The third partner decided that they wanted to, they weren't interested in continuing. And so I overnight went from a sole proprietor with like a third of a part-time staff to having this building and having this team. And it was October 2019. And so I had all of her projects and all of her work, and we had to call all of her clients. We did call 40 times and say, I'm so sorry. She's passed away. What would you like to do? And then it was COVID, like 6 months later. And, I had a 10-month-old at the time. And it was just awful. And flip side of that is we had this remote work situation already set up. We had been hiring mostly people who were women coming back to work from having been home, or we had 2 employees who had really young babies who had come back from maternity leave, didn't have a job anymore. And so we had this really flexible, really dedicated staff. It's already all set up to be remote. And so we moved into COVID, and my business doubled, we inherited all the ends work. And then my business doubled just on the Flintlock side that first year of 2020, because we were getting a ton of referrals of work because we were still working at full speed because we were set up to be remote already. So grew an enormous amount during, had not even caught our breath yet, and had this incredible year in 2020, doubled again in 2021 in terms of revenue and size without growing the staff any. And at that point, we were all just burned out. And so started to slowly grow to try to like get to a sustainable place, because we'd already fired all the clients that weren't awesome. We weren't working on anything that wasn't incredible work, that was pretty lucrative, that we were working with people we loved. And so there weren't projects we were going to say no to, which was like the first round of things that you do, right? And so then grew, not realizing that like 6 to 8 would be a really big change. And then started to realize that like we just needed more process than we had, right? At a team of 6, you don't need a ton of process because everybody is hearing everything and everybody knows everything that's going on. And so you don't have to write anything down. At 8, we did. And we need, and it took a while to figure out how to build that process of a slightly bigger company. And so we spent 2 years doing that. I had a second baby, and then I got divorced right afterwards, like 3 weeks later, which was another wild year. And, then really, I think finally got our feet under us to say, okay, like this is its own self-sustaining thing, but I think treating it like a design project helped. We're designing a company. We have to design what we want the experience to be like for us and for our clients. We have to design what our priorities are and what our process is. And then we have to write that all down and train everybody how to do it consistently. And so I think, it has been a real whirlwind of growing a company. And I think this has been the first year that I feel like I'm getting to be really intentional about taking a step back and being really thoughtful and, having the capacity to grow in a meaningful way. Because I think one of the things I really was resistant to was I didn't want to just scale up my problems. Like I could tell that structurally, like we weren't there yet. And I knew I could hire more people and like relieve the immediate pressure, and that we would just immediately infect them with all of our bad habits that weren't working.
Yeah, bring them into a more established system.
Yeah. So we had to build the system before we could add the people to it, because then we had, we were adding them with this intention and with this system and process and theory and, philosophy that we could explain and was documented. And we're still in that process. And, it's been hard, I think, for some of our older staff who moved through, like they worked for 3 different companies working for me, in the last 6 or 7 years. And so I think part of it is just all this like leaning in together to, this is a little bit chaotic. We're trying really hard, and we're still running a very busy business while we're doing all of this. So, also being able to communicate to our clients what's happening and why, and, really bringing them along with us too.
Oh, really interesting. Do you have any tools or even like software or things like that where you're like, once you discovered it, you were like, oh my gosh, how was I not using this before? This is so helpful. Maybe it was a book or a process, or do you have a few examples of things if you've just run a business?
We have really been trying to work through kind of our software structure. We, from the design practice side, we're still all on AutoCAD LT, which I feel really strongly about, because we're doing site plans, we're working from civil, we do lots of master planning and the landscape as well as architecture. We mostly design really small, simple buildings. So everything being in 2D and everything being able to be one set of integrated drawings has been really important to us. But it does mean we have a little bit of a limitation of people who can work for us. If you're an architect, you work in AutoCAD, and you really like traditional architecture, give us a shout. If you want to learn how to do development and construction, we also are trying to find somebody to be, I think, almost like a development intern kind of position, right? Somebody that wants to like see a whole project soup to nuts and also can do some of the design, build, construction coordination. But AutoCAD has been a little bit of a limitation for us. And we've had some great people who are only Revit that like aren't going to be a good fit. ClickUp is what we ended up with in terms of project management. I know some people who feel really strongly about Monday.com and Asana and Notion. So looking through those, none of them worked great for us. ClickUp has been really helpful, especially a lot of our projects are relatively replicable steps, right? And so there's 27 things that we need to remember to do in schematic design. That can be made into a template. And then every time you start a project, you're starting with all of the steps that you know that you did last time. And you're just adjusting timelines and who it's assigned to, and you can take a lot of notes. So I have ClickUp is one of those, they don't tell you how to use the tool. It's really open-ended. And so it's overpowered probably for what most people are going to use it for. But I do think it's been a really good way to aggregate a lot of information learning between projects, which is something we really have been trying to do. Slack has been something that we both love and struggle with a little bit, right? We're still a partially remote team. We have employees on the West Coast who are fully remote. We've got employees in town who are really introverted and just don't like coming in the office and work from home. And then we've got most of our team is in the office. And so Slack has been one way too that we really do still try to build this culture of having a home life and having a home work-life balance and being able to be off and being able to set your own schedule to some extent. And so one of the things that we try to do is have a hierarchy of communication that if you get an email, we don't have an expectation you're responding to that email for like a week because you're working and you're doing stuff. So, we never send emails that are really urgent. Slack is our internal communication method. And so you can Slack something to somebody at any time of day, and everybody is expected to have their Slack notifications turned off when they're not in the office. So if you get a Slack, the expectation is I was working right now and I'm sending this to you while I'm working on it. I need you to respond next time you're working, which may not be right now. And so that's a 24-hour response time. And then we tell everybody if you get a text, there shouldn't be very many of them, but it does mean I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I do need something right now. And then, an unscheduled phone call is something might actually be on fire. But part of this, I think, is us trying to just build this out. How do we all work? We're a really young company. We've got kind of our series of interns. We're in our early 20s, and then we've got kind of our mid-age staff. Are all mid-30s and we've got a bunch of little kids, combination of all of our team. And so us trying to figure out how to do that has felt like a real trial and error. But I don't know that we haven't found our software that feels like it's been life-changing yet, might be the short answer.
Well, no, that's really helpful because I'm always having to try things that don't quite work. I just gave up on Asana actually and ClickUp literally on my list for today. I'm like, that's the next one. I've been through a few things. I'll run
you through the way that we use it sometime because it took us a while to figure out how to use it. So I don't think we're using it right, but we're using it in a way that's really helpful.
Yeah. I don't know how much email you have to deal with, but Superhuman has been one of my favorite apps for email.
Oh, man.
It's not even so much AI generated. It's more like you can do everything from your keyboard. You don't have to leave it. I can set reminders in 2 seconds. I can put calendar invites with Zoom links in 2 seconds, schedule things, insert my... It's amazing how helpful it is for us. And Matt loves it too.
I'm literally writing this down.
And our whole team, one of the coolest thing actually is say you and I were emailing and you're a client. And rather than forwarding an email to someone, blah, 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 and interrupting I can literally comment people into the thread from my team at Matt, at Mel, at Nolan. And they can see the whole thread and we can have a little internal conversation about the thread as that thread's going on without disrupting the email or accidentally replying all or something. Super, super, super helpful. But so good. I'm going to try ClickUp and I recommend Superhuman. I don't get paid to say that.
I don't get paid to say any of this except, Inkdev did start doing product sponsors. Oh, no. And I pitched this to the board. I was like, this is the way AIA gets paid. This is the way ASLA gets paid. I described to them that my ideal product sponsor is somebody that I already feel really passionate about. Right. It's like a product that everybody is using already and we all already love. And so the example I kept using to our board, trying to convince them this was a good idea, was James Hardy. And then I met a James Hardy rep and I was like, wait, would you guys sponsor us? And they are.
That's awesome.
And so they're our new Small Bite sponsor, which is our lecture series that happens twice a month, sponsored by James Hardy, which I'm just thrilled by. Because if you look at photos of literally anybody's work, I'm like, you know what you see? You see some James Hardy.
Yeah, no, that's great. By the way, we use AutoCAD too. I don't use AutoCAD. I use SketchUp, really? AutoCAD. So that's all we use. And it works so well because I design in SketchUp and Matt will design in mainly AutoCAD, but also does SketchUp sometimes. But we'll kind of go back and forth SketchUp 3D model, back to AutoCAD to refine. Once you get to refine more, work out some code things, bring it back into SketchUp to really see it and feel it and understand it. And then back into AutoCAD for final construction drawings. It's been fun to collaborate between us two. But
yeah. We use SketchUp when we have to do 3D stuff for, we've got a couple of cities that'll want a 3D model of wanting to see what something looks like. Goes into SketchUp and it's quick and easy.
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, I am software is a tool. It's not a solution, right? Yeah. It's a hammer, but the hammer alone can't build the house.
Right.
So you can have a better hammer or a worse hammer, but like...
And what is the incremental difference, in it, if it's 5% better, but it takes you hours and hours of time to onboard and teach other people. Yeah. Well,
that's also been my opinion about Revit is we work with we're doing some really fun partnership projects, which I'm loving. We've got some partnership projects with Kronberg in Atlanta, nice. With Jennifer Griffin in Tulsa, in Providence.
She's talking to
and
Jen.
Like, they're so fun.
Amazing
I love
people.
all of them. Yes, it is like one of the most fun things that we're doing is doing more partnership projects. They're all the way in Revit. And so there are times that I'll be like, yeah, I'll just go in and change that eave detail. Like I could do it on the call right now and send it back to you. And they're like, that's not how Revit works. Like I'm going to have to schedule that and send it to a person. It's going to take them 6 hours to update this. And the product they're getting is better, right? Like the thing that they have at the end of it is a model that is a lot more information. But Revit is not able to, unless you were using it in this really specific way, to be able to do not all the information. Like you can't just sketch something in and be like, it's kind of like this.
I have a working theory that the AutoCAD works better in a design build workflow because you are kind of involved in the whole process where you just don't need as much detail because you know what you're doing. And you still got to communicate to subs. You don't want to have to have everything a conversation, but we work out, we know what we're still getting, I say we know, we're trying to find that balance of what do we need to communicate and draw a set of plans and what can we leave for the field? And it's actually better that way, so anyway, that's my little working theory.
No, we struggle with that too, but I feel the same way where like the product we're making is the drawings, but the drawings are just a set of directions.
Yep.
And so if the directions aren't clear, it doesn't matter if the directions are pretty.
Right.
And so we really lean into, as a company, putting a photograph of something in a set with a leader note on it.
Great.
I mean, like, I didn't need to redraw this for you. You can see what I want in this picture. Yeah. And so we've got, we get really nerdy about our building science details, but there's a lot of stuff, especially in renovations, that just like noted photos are so helpful to a contractor. And, we're just about to probably grow out of the size, but we're still at the size that I am sometimes in the field drawing a detail on a piece of lumber in the field and then like taking a picture of it to send it to the owner.
Yeah.
Being like, okay, here's what I just told your guys to do.
Some of that's kind of fun too. Like, it's hard to let go because you're like, you feel like you're building something, and I don't want to ever kind of lose that idea of, there's that tension of having it all. You want enough worked out up front where you don't have surprises, budget things that you didn't foresee, whatever. There's also this thing is if you try to impose and make every decision 2 years before the final completion, it's kind of like trying to write a book all at once. Like that's a process that happens. So I talk about like a project is letting a story unfold. You don't impose the story, you let it unfold. But you might have the plot lines, right? And you don't want to be just, maybe we'll see what happens, unless you just got $1 billion project or something and the budget doesn't matter, time constraints don't matter. But anyway, something I think about.
Like, don't pick know that you're going to put wallpaper there, but don't pick the wallpaper
100%.
Until it's time to order.
And we just put an allowance in. We know about how much it costs and make it fit in the budget. And if it doesn't, maybe you can take it from somewhere else.
Yeah, interior design is the place that I find out the most. The times that we do interior design on something, and we picked all the hardware, we picked all the light fixtures, and we picked the wallpaper, and then it's 2 years before they build it, and then I see it before they build it, and I'm like, ooh, I want to change everything. I don't like any of it.
Yeah. No, I feel the same way.
Planting design is the same way. We often are not, we're showing where beds are and giving rough quantities, but we're not doing a full detailed planting plan until right before they plant it, because it'll just get value engineered. We need to know how much money we have left. Yeah. We need to know what changes got made to the building as we're going. And so we are often doing, that's a very incremental thing, right? What's the minimum viable amount of information that we need to do a good job at this phase? And then what's the information that we don't need yet? And we might actually be better off not picking yet, that we actually would be better off to have 6 months from now, because we'll know more.
Yeah, that's cool. Last question.
It's a feature, not a flaw.
No, I agree. It is. It is a feature, not a bug. And once again, it goes back to that. I really love the design build workflow because it enables all of these things. If you're not in a design build workflow, if you're the architect, you have to have it all worked out. Basically,
Yeah.
Do you have any examples of, growing a business, all the things you've done? It's hard, as you've talked about, multiple things, whether it's projects that didn't go well or a bunch of clients getting dumped on you, and then you're constantly learning and growing and making mistakes and trying new things, hiring new people, all that, realizing your own weaknesses. Do you have any a really good example of like a failure or perceived failure that turned into something that really you're thankful for, was success? Like maybe a favorite failure or something like that, in kind of the past 10 years of your business.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm probably in it right now, right? Of like the realizing all of this stuff. Cause it also feels like a real, 30s or your like decade of growth. I feel like I have had this series of realizations of like things that once you see them, you're like, oh, that's really obvious. Okay, sure. No, I can see how that happened and what happened there to make that. But I think I have really not always been the most self-aware about how and why we're making decisions. I'm just always all the way in the weeds and excited and interested in the thing that we're getting into, and being really entrepreneurial, but also just really curious. And so getting us into all of these different kinds of business versions, and Eric Kronberg and Elizabeth Ward and I are going to write a zoning code. And, now we're doing developer trainings, and like, we're diving into all this stuff. At one point I had a business plan to start an art and antiques store called Ivy House that we were going to sell directly to designers. It's a beautiful business plan. It would have been a great business. Maybe someday we'll start it. Like, we're diving in all the time. It was really good for me to have to get to a place business-wise to be like, oh, I'm making problems for myself and other people by not being disciplined enough. And that's both a great thing about me, and that's a thing that I'm going to have to learn to be more structured about. And so I think that maybe my own self is probably my favorite failure of like learning to see every pro has a con. Right? Like every strength is also a weakness, and every weakness is also a strength, right? Like all of it, just, you have to be self-aware enough to come up with something. And this is something I also think is true about renovations and rehabs and adaptive reuse. You have to be able to understand what the building is to do something good with it. And so you have to be able to spot the strengths and the weaknesses, and then design a good solution that's getting you something good at the end. And you just have to be flexible and fluid about that, right? One of the things about development, I've made this joke a couple of times, so this is also something people may have heard, but I joke, I'm a very high strung person. I'm pretty anxious and pretty high strung. And I joke like I would be this high strung about being an accountant. And so I just picked a business that, like, real estate is hard and risky and changes constantly. And the economics nationally aren't the same when you started, when you end a project is when you started a project, and interest rates are now 8% and now they're 3%. And
now there's tariffs.
Constantly changing. Now there's tariffs. Lumber is going to double again. Like, it's constantly changing. It's really high risk. It's constantly very high speed. And so you just have to learn to be really fluid and like unimpacted by that, right? Like, you do the best thing you can do currently with the information that you have. And tomorrow, when you have new information, you'll do the best thing you can there. But I think I have really leaned into, in my 30s, being able to spot both in myself and in other people and in buildings and in projects and in, client company structures and things, being able to have a better, curious, not judgmental understanding of what is really happening so that you can then make intentional decisions to get to an intentional outcome, I think is a thing that has been like that process through design work and business work and construction work and, personal relationships, I think has been a real theme of the last year or two, which is yielding really, really great results.
Oh, well, that is fantastic answer and like way to end too. So that's awesome. Gosh, I could keep talking to you for another hour and a half because we've got a lot of overlapping things going on. But for the sake of the podcast and listeners, we'll all end here. But how do people follow you, get in touch with you, your business website, all of that?
Yeah. So we've talked a bunch about InkDev because it's the thing that I'm spending quite a bit of time doing. But membership is the best way to be a part of that. There is a Slack group for InkDev. You can visit incrementaldevelopment.org. You can follow us on Instagram at Incremental Dev, DEV. LinkedIn, Incremental Development Alliance. We've got tons of trainings going on this year. We've got a national virtual boot camp that takes projects all the way through pre-development, sponsored by James Hardy. It's kicking off next week on the 25th. So for people with a development project idea that want to make their neighborhood stronger, we've got one kicking off right now, but we almost always have one coming up. My company name is Flintlock Lab. Right now, secret preview. It might not be 12 months from now. But right now, we're Flintlock Lab, LAB, which is Landscape Architecture Building. It's our website and our socials. And that's probably the best way to get a hold of me. I'm never able to, I don't check any of our socials, but we do have people that check those. If it was just me, I would never respond to anything. You have to know yourself, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And solve around your own failures.
Totally. You can't do everything. Can't be good at everything. You're like a Renaissance woman already. So, I mean, the fact that you don't do social media is yeah.
And it'll take me at least a week if you send me an email. Just have that expectation. That's best case scenario. That's our company policy.
That's funny.
I'm going to check out Superhuman though. Maybe we'll get it down.
Let me know.
Okay.
Maybe Well, Ali, hey, really great to talk to you. Thanks so much for coming on and sharing your thoughts. Been a really fun conversation.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. This was really fun. We'll have to do a repeat talking about, I think we're at really similar places just in terms of trying to solve all this stuff. So I'm really excited to catch up again soon. Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.
All right. Thanks.
See ya.
If you've been enjoying this podcast, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please leave us a 5-star review. Thanks so much for listening, and catch you on the next episode.